Welcome to Hindi Reading Class 10A. Today we're going to be talking about nasal vowels, and we're going to answer the question that was asked 2 lessons ago. And this is nasal vowels the correct way. There's always an incorrect way. This is actually the way, the right way, not just taking shortcuts. And hopefully after this lesson, you will understand fully what nasal vowels are and also how they differ from nasal consonants. And so we're discussing this dot, this bindu, this anuswar at the end of this word. What is that? Well, it can't be N or M, according to what we learned before. And why is that? Well, it can't be that because the dot is only an N sound or an M sound if there's a conjunct, if there's another consonant following it, aka only when it's the first letter in a conjunct. Here, there is no letter following it. It comes at the very end of the word. Therefore, it can't be NRM. So, what is this? Good question. And she's been thinking for a while, so let's go ahead and answer the question. Last time we were talking about nasal consonants. Now, if you remember, a nasal consonant is what? A nasal consonant is a sound where you use your tongue or your lips, and also you push air through your nose, therefore your nose vibrates. And so to us it sounds like an N sound or a M sound. But there are also nasal vowels that make your nose vibrate. So we're talking about nasal consonants, and now we are talking about nasal vowels. And it sounds like you're talking through your nose. Now, some of you may have never have seen these TV shows, but in decades gone by, apparently Americans thought it was funny to have people talk through their nose. What's on TV now? I don't know. However, in older days, people would talk through their nose and make high-pitched nasal sounds, and people would laugh at them. So, this is what you sound like. This is what a nasal vowel is. It sounds like you're talking through your nose. So what is the difference between a nasal vowel and a nasal consonant? Oh, Mr. Studious in the library. A nasal vowel is a vowel sound. In other words, your tongue does not touch anywhere in your mouth and your lips stay separated. So this is the difference between a consonant and a vowel. For a vowel, you don't touch your tongue anywhere in your mouth. The minute you touch your tongue to the roof of your mouth or to your teeth or anything, it's no longer a vowel, it's a consonant. Similarly, your lips have to stay separated. You can move your lips, but if they touch, then it will immediately become an M sound. And so anything where your tongue is not be touching somewhere, your throat is not contracting and scraping, your your lips aren't touching, this is a vowel sound. And so don't do that. Don't close, and don't scrape the back of your throat. And so when you touch your nose, however, you will still feel a vibration. And so they hold this in common with the nasal consonants. With the N and M sounds, with a nasal vowel, you still feel a vibration. And all vowels in Hindi can be nasalized with the exception of re. Why? Because re in reality is no longer a vowel, but we treat it that way. So the symbol that we are normally using to represent a nasal vowel is this moon shape with Mr. Bindu on top. Therefore, we call it Chandra, which means moon, Bindu, Chandra Bindu. And so, if you notice on the left, we have the regular vowel sound. Hopefully by now you know these. If not, please go back to lesson 3. And we're going to practice the non-nasal vowel and then the nasal vowel. Now, you may probably need more time to practice this on your own, and it's helpful if you touch your nose because you'll be able to feel what's going on. Don't squeeze your nose. If you squeeze your nose, you're going to induce a nasal sound. We just gently rest our fingers on our nose. So let's practice. I'm going to do it, and then you can do it in your own time. You can pause the video and practice. So the one on the left is ah. The one on the right is ah. So ah versus ah. Ah versus ah. So all we're doing is talking through our nose. We're pushing the air through our nose. The one on the left is ooh. The one on the right is mm. Ooh versus mm. Ooh versus mm. The one on the left is a. The one on the right is e. A versus e. A versus e. The one on the left is a. The one on the left is a. The one on the right is mm. A versus mm. A versus mm. The one on the left is a. The one on the left is a. The one on the right is e. The one on the right is e. Notice we're still preserving the shortness. We've only pushed the sound through our nose. So this is I versus I. I versus I. The one on the left is U. Left is U. The one on the right is um. Um. So U versus um. U versus um. However, sometimes due to space constraints and the fact that people do not want to put the Chandrabindu in weird places because it's hard to print and or write, we have this concept where we are forced to use Mr. Bindu by himself. If you notice on the right, what's happening? There's things coming above the top line. And because of that, Mr. Chandrabindu has become Bindu. Did that change him into an N or a M? No, it did not. It's still a nasal vowel. So the rule is, we use Chandrabindu. This is the rule. So if you're a learner, please memorize this rule. You use Chandrabindu for nasal vowels unless there is no space above the top line. In other words, if something comes above the top line, we use the bindu, the dot, by itself to represent a nasal vowel. So remember, this has absolutely nothing to do with the consonants N or M. Man, that dude is scary. Don't say N or M for this. So these sounds do not end with an N or M. So don't use your tongue. Don't close your lips. First one is E. Second one is in. Third one is on. Fourth one is on. 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 So let's practice. I is on the left. Sorry, not I. E is on the left. E is on the left. And on the right is mm. So we have E versus E versus On the left, we have O, O. And on the right, we have um, um. Left, O versus um, O versus um. The left is ah, ah. And on the right, we have um, um. So the left is ah, and the right is um. The same applies whenever we use matra symbols, aka matrain. So if you notice, all the ones that have nothing above the top line, we use the full chandrabindu. We use the moon and the dot. However, if anything at all from the matra comes above the top line, we have to use the dot. It doesn't mean that it's changed into an N or an M. It means in this case that there is no space. Therefore, we have chosen to use the dot rather than try to squash in Mr. Chandrabindu there. And so all of these are nasalized vowels. Yes, if it doesn't fit, you must use it. Okay, so let's practice. So the first one on the left is me, me, and the one on the right is me, me. Left, me, me. Right, me, me. Left is ma, ma. Right is ma, ma. Left, ma versus ma. Left, ma versus ma. The left is ha, ha. The right is ha, ha. Ha versus ha, ha versus ha, ha versus ha. So the one on the left is kyo, and the one on the right is kyon. The one on the left is kyo. The one on the right is kyon. The one on the left is kyo. The one on the right is kyon. Kyo versus kyon. Kyo versus kyon. And so we have to realize that nasalization is actually extremely important in Hindi, probably more important than we realize. And that's because it changes the meaning of words completely. This is something that will upset Indians if you do it wrong. I have an interesting story. The first one, and I remember someone said to a man one time, "Aap kaha se hai?" Thinking, "Where are you from?" And the man stopped, and the man looked, and the man said, "Kaha, kaha, kaha." Why is that? Well, "Aap kaha se hai?" Makes no sense because kaha means said. So you something said from is so it makes no sense. So he was fairly frustrated and that the nasalization wasn't done. And so we see on the first line here, kaha means said, whereas kahan in the nose, not with an N, in the nose vibrates, there's no N sound, no touching of the tongue, means where. Kaha, kahan. Second line, sas, his mother-in-law. Sas. Whereas on the right line, sans means breath. Big difference. Sas. And right is sans. So, you know, this can have a huge difference in meaning. Ah, मेरी जिंदगी में सिर्फ एक ही सांस है. Just one mother-in-law. एक ही सांस है. Okay. So, third line, ha is, and ha is are. So if we get that pluralization wrong, we're actually grammatically incorrect. So you might be going around saying he, they is good instead of they are good, just by nasalization. Third line, we have bas is a fragrance, and bas is bamboo. Pooch, ask, whereas poonch is a tail. Kata is cut, past tense, whereas kanta is a thorn. Wahi and yahi, that very one, this very one, whereas wahi and yahi, that in this very place. Now that is a very major difference just from nasalization. So you can imagine sentences you would completely throw someone off. Wahi yahi versus wahi yahi. So kahi is said in the past tense as well. And kahi means somewhere or less. Huge difference. Nai is a barber, whereas nai is a similarity. Pav is 1/4 of a seer, which is, I think, a weight of measurement. However, a palm or pound is a foot. Huge differences here. So it's good to take the time to do well on this. In spoken Hindi, the nasalization may be the only indication that something is plural. For instance, in spoken Hindi, normally people do not say they ever. They meaning the plural of them. Normally people always say vo. Well, that has an interesting implication in that vo gai is she went, but vo gai means they went, those group of women went. Vo gai, vo gai. And so it can throw off completely the meaning of a sentence if it's done wrong. In a similar way, wo jayegi, she will go, whereas wo jayengi, they will go. So it's really the verb and the nasalization on the verb that is indicating the number of people. Wo jayegi, wo jayengi. However, if I see a word like kinchna, how do I know if the bindu represents an N sound or E, a nasalized vowel? It could mean either. Now, that is a very good point. Why? Because we're using the dot in the middle of a word for multiple purposes now. If it's at the end of the word, we're fine. But in the middle of a word, we don't know if it's an N or a nasalized vowel. How can we? It's very interesting. So this could be kinchna or it could be kinchna, kinchna. So now it's time for the bad news, everyone. In addition to that very good question. There was a time in the Wild West where people didn't follow the rules, aka there were no rules. Over time, these rules have come about, these guidelines. Worse yet, there are those who choose to ignore the rules by covering their face. Shame. So, for example, we have this quote here, and it's from the BSI Bible Psalms. And here you see there it has that with the dot. However, if we look in the dictionary for that thing with the dot, we will not see it. Why? Because in the dictionary it has the actual spelling, which has the Chandrabindu. Now, what do you know about the Chandrabindu versus the dot in the situation? Well, in this situation, there's nothing above the line. So there's no reason to not print the full Chandrabindu, indicating that ah is actually nasalized, meaning ah. What instead they did is they put just the dot. So technically, this should be bond and not bond, bond, bond. So what this will do is it will mislead poor innocent learners like you and me. Now, to Indians, this doesn't matter. They've learned it already by ear. It will mislead the learner. Yes, pull your hair out. How will I ever know whether to pronounce a bindu as a nasal consonant or as a nasal vowel? Is it a N or is it a Is it, what is it? It's either on, or What is it? There's a difference there, right? Unfortunately, if a word contains a bindu and not a chanda bindu, we're talking about in the middle of the word, the only way for a learner to be sure of which one it is it a nasal vowel or an end sound, is we have to use a dictionary. Yes, the dictionary, a blessing and a malediction. So, for example, if you saw the word kinchna, you generally have no way of knowing if they intended an N sound or a nasalized vowel for the bindu, for the little dot. So to uncover the secret identity of Mr. Dot, we will have to look this up in a dictionary. So you pull out your handy dictionary, you open it up, you find it after a while. Hopefully, the last lesson has taught you how to find the alphabetical order of these things. Actually, 2 lessons ago. Is that an M sound? Well, what do you think? If we had to use our deductive reasoning on is that M with a dot over it, a M sound, what would we think based on all we have learned thus far? Well, remember lessons ago we talked about that an M sound only is joined with ba, pa, ba, and pa. So using our powerful deductive skills of reasoning, this dot cannot be an M sound. Okay, if we look again, okay, it's kind of common sense and not. Why does it have a dot over it? If it had why didn't they just put M if they meant an M sound? If we look at another word here that clearly has a ma in it, actually we see that it has a M, there's no dot over it. We also have a Chandrabindu, which we know means nasalized, meaning through the nose, and then, so what we have here is we have M followed by A. We know A actually means followed by the M with the dot. If we compare it with the image on the right, we see that this is actually the sound ma, except nasalized, ma. So what this means and what we have deduced is the sound that the letter that they're using, the symbol that they're using in the Oxford in the English Dictionary for nasalization, nasalized vowel, is an M with a dot over it. So this M with a dot is not an M. It is actually a symbol that the previous vowel is nasalized, the previous vowel being represented by that A. So the M with a dot means the previous vowel is nasalized. That's what the M with the dot means. It means that is nasalized. So we go back to our original word, which was this, and we notice that the long I, which is represented by an I with a line, following it has a M with a dot. What does that mean? Well, we just said that the M with the dot means that the previous vowel was in the nose. And so this means that this is actually a nasalized vowel. It is not an N sound. The dot in this case does not represent an N sound. It represents a nasalized E, not een or eem, but just E. And so this is what the dictionary is telling us. And this is why we have to use the dictionary. The dictionary will clarify what the script is actually trying to tell us, because the script is not 100% accurate. If we looked in Prabhat, Advanced Hindi English Dictionary, we would see this instead. Right? So we would see that tilde sign, the wiggly wiggly wave, followed by na. Well, what that is telling us is that the thing that comes before na is somewhere else. And so now we have to find that somewhere else. So we look at the previous entry, which is just the first part of that word by itself. And what do we see? We see KH, two E's with a wiggly wave over them and a C. What does that mean? What does that mean? This guy is going to go bald. What does that mean? Well, we're going to turn to the front of the dictionary. So Prabhat Advanced Hindi Dictionary has something that Oxford doesn't have, and it tells you that they have special symbols for all the nasalized forms. So take a look at the forms on the right. You will notice that all of them are nasalized. It says nasalized forms. And what is in common with all of them? Well, all of them have a little wiggly wave tilde sign over them. So is represented by the lowercase a, is represented by the uppercase a, I is one I, E is double E, U is one U, U is double O, A is E. No, this is not like in English, but A is E, is AI, O is O, yeah, obviously, and is AU. But to represent the nasalized forms, what did they do? They put the little wiggly wave over it. So now it becomes uh, e, e, mm, e, uh, wiggly wave. And so this tells us that this, which we have here, is actually a E sound that has been nasalized. It is not an N. We don't see N there. We see two E's with a wave, a tilde. And so that means that this is actually E, as we also saw in the Oxford Dictionary. But in Oxford we had to figure out that M with a dot meant nasalized. Here they're telling us that the wave means nasalized. And so for whatever dictionary you have, this is going to be the thing. You're going to have to figure out, according to the notation, what they mean. If this were an N sound and not a nasalized sound, if the dot, the bindu, represented an N, then we would have seen an N in their pronunciation code. We would have seen KHEENC, and there would have been no wave above the double E. Practical Hindi English Dictionary contains this. So we know that this is a nasalized vowel. We know that there's no N here. So practical in Hindi English Dictionary, so a very old dictionary, I don't know why it had it. It has a I with a line over it, meaning a long I, followed by a double colon, which apparently to them means a nasalized vowel. So once again, we see the same information, kinchna, just in a different form. It too explains. If you look in the front of the dictionary, this is where you're going to find explanations if they exist in the front of the dictionary, not the back, the middle. So it tells us that basically, uh, oh, actually, I said the wrong thing. It says a colon following a short vowel denotes its long form. So the I with the colon means E, not E. So E. And then it says a horizontal line mark over the body of a vowel symbol represents its what? Nasalized form. And so it shows you. We have a with chandra bindu, meaning that's represented by a with a line over it. Is represented by a colon with a line. I is a I with a line. Is a I colon with a line. Is a U with a line, etc., etc., etc. So for them, they don't have a little squiggly, they have just a line. And that means the vowel that is underneath is nasalized. So these are actually quite clear. The vowel underneath is nasalized. In Oxford Hindi English, you have to know that the M with a dot afterward means the previous sound is nasalized. So, so what are we getting at here? Basically, whatever dictionary you have will have a different notation, but it will tell you if if the dot represents an N or an M sound or it's the nasalized vowel. So the dictionary is your friend. So this is true for words in their dictionary form, but okay, we're going to discuss something a little bit later. So how do you pronounce this? Well, obviously, we have the Chandra Bindu here. We have the little half moon dot. And so the sound that is underneath it is going to be a nasalized vowel. And so this would be not ja, but ja. And then after it, we have g. And so altogether, that would be jang, jang. How about this? The same as the previous word. So what was should be ja, because of the Chandra Bindu has become ja, followed by cha. So this is janch, janch. There is no N sound here. It's a nasalized vowel. Janch. How do we pronounce this? What do you say? Well, if you said anything, you gave the wrong answer because the answer is, remember, if there is a dot over any word that you've never seen before, we can't assume what it is because people don't follow the rules. There are people that do follow the rules. The dictionary follows the rules, and most of our publications follow the rules except for quotations. So we look in the dictionary to be safe, and what do we see? In Oxford, it has Gambhi with a line R. What does that mean? Well, we know it's not nasalized because that M would have a dot over it if it were. So this is nothing other than a ma sound. The dot represents ma. It's in a conjunct with bhi. And so this word is pronounced gambhir. Gambhir. How do you pronounce this? Do you have your answer? Well, if you said anything, you're wrong again because you should have looked in the dictionary. Why? Because we cannot trust anyone. They're all out to fool us. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to turn you into paranoid person, but and so we look in the dictionary and here we have Gandagi. So is the dot an N sound or a nasalized vowel? Well, obviously from that N, we figured out it is an N sound. So it is the N pronounced where the tongue touching the teeth. How do we know that? Well, then 2 lessons ago, we learned it's because we follow what comes after, which is a the with the tongue touching the teeth and nowhere else in the mouth. So this is pronounced gandagi, gandagi, gandagi. How do we pronounce this? Do you have your answer? Well, hopefully by now you know that whenever we see a dot, we need to look in the dictionary. And so here we see a N with a squiggly line over it. Now be careful. And that is because, remember, in one of our dictionaries, the squiggly line actually meant nasalized, but it had to be over a vowel. Here we're talking about Oxford. What does that squiggly line mean? Hmm. So every dictionary is different. On page XVII, number 18 of the preface of the Oxford in the English Dictionary, we will see that the N with the squiggly line over it actually is an N sound. It is the N sound that belongs to ch and j. And so this is, has nothing to do with a nasalized vowel. It is an N sound. It's an N conjunct with j. And so this is pronounced conjure, conjure. How do we pronounce this? I hope you're not failing by now, because you should know that whenever there's a dot, if you've never seen the word before, we need to look it up in the dictionary to get the accurate pronunciation. That's why I call this lesson the correct way to do nasal vowels, because it doesn't assume you look things up in the dictionary. It is the correct way to do nasal vowels. So here, what do we see? We see an M with a dot. And what do we know about Oxford English Dictionary? That the M with a dot over it means a nasalized vowel that precedes. And so this actually is a nasal vowel. This is not hont, it is hont, hont. There is a vibration in the nose when we say O for the duration of O. Hont, hont. And that is how it is pronounced correctly. How do we pronounce this? I'm not tricking you anymore. So at this point, we take up our dictionary, we look in the dictionary, and what do we see? This is Oxford English. And we know that the M with the dot over it means that the O preceding it has to be a nasalized vowel. And so this is pronounced, you say it first, yes, jonk, 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 jonk. How do we pronounce this? Well, here if we look in Oxford, we will see N with a dot over it. What is the N with the dot? Well, if we look in the beginning, it tells us that the N with the dot over it is simply the N sound that goes with the, ka, ga, and ka. That symbol we never use, but it is the first line which starts in the back of the throat, as we learned 2 lessons ago. And so there is no nasal vowel in this at all. It is just an N conjunct with ga. And so this is pronounced, you say it first, singar, singar. Very good. Singar, singar. So she wants to talk about things we won't find in the dictionary. Well, we will continue this discussion in our next part B of this class.